for joining us today. But to begin with, I'd like y'all to introduce yourself because I think y'all can do better justice at it than I could. So starting with you, Shivani.
Okay, thanks Radhika. Thrilled to be here. Okay, I'm Shivani, Bhasin, Sachdeva. I see many familiar faces in the room and on the panel. I am the founder and CEO of India Alternatives, which is a mid-market private equity platform. We invest behind transformational themes in India, and one of those themes is women-oriented consumption. So I thought the audience should know that.
Yes, absolutely. Soumya?
Soumya Rajan. I'm the founder and CEO of Waterfield Advisors. I founded the company about 12 years ago as a multi-family office and wealth advisory company. We work with families in order to help them with their investments, both in public markets as well as private. We also do a lot of work in non-investment related areas for family businesses that include philanthropy, that includes family governance and succession. We manage assets of about 5 billion as financial assets in the company right now.
Thank you, Soumya. Neha?
Hi, I'm Neha Grover. I'm with IFC. I lead the South Asia private equity funds and co-investments business for IFC. IFC is a multilateral development institution, a development finance institution, which invests across emerging markets. We are the private sector investing arm of the World Bank Group. Last year we deployed about $48 billion globally. In India we deployed about $3 billion. In funds we deployed about $600 million last year. We've got a pretty large portfolio for funds and co-investments in India as well. Nice to meet you.
Well, I think hearing the numbers only that you guys mentioned, people would be like, okay, where are these funds really coming from? So let me start with the first question, Neha. Since you help, private equity funds raise capital, you are one of their LPs. What do you really see in them before giving them capital and putting the weight of an organization like IFC behind them?
So I think like any investing evaluation, right? Whether you're investing as an LP or you're investing as a GP or you're investing your own personal money in companies, we look at who we are backing. We look at what is the business we are backing. So the most important criteria would be the team. Who is the team? Have they been doing this for long? Has the team been stable? In terms of the business that they are running, what is the strategy? Does the strategy actually make sense for the market? Because sometimes there are strategies which we believe will probably not do well in the first 3 years or 5 years, and that's the investing period for a fund. The other piece that we will look at is the fit with our own portfolio, right? You may be the best fund manager out there, but it's possible that doesn't fit our developmental agenda. So for us as a developmental institution, there is also that nuance of not just earning profits or investing for profits, but also investing for developmental impact. So for us, that's a very important criteria. Like we will not invest in very large, let's say, or any public market funds, for example, right? Because there's no developmental agenda. Our money is not going for any development. So these are the 3-4 sort of top criteria that we look at. Honestly, it's far more nuanced than I can simplify in a question like this, in an answer like this.
Yeah, but I think a lot of pitches are going to come to you after this, so keep your inbox, checked on. But Soumya, you've had a very interesting journey. Before I ask you the technicals, let me ask you how from banking you thought of setting up, Waterfield, and how was the journey like? A lot of people here are wanting to become entrepreneurs in the space of investing. So why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Very happy to share my journey. It was really from a midlife crisis that one had at the age of 40, and I got things quite easily in the organization that I was with. This was Standard Chartered. I was with them for 17 years, Grinleys and then Standard Chartered, and I was heading the private bank of Standard Chartered in 2008. So things came early, but also when things come early, you kind of also ask the question, well, what do I do next? And am I going to do this for the next 25 years, 30 years of my life? Again, people are living longer these days, so you don't really retire at 60. So it was really about trying to understand what was the meaning of what I wanted to do. And I somehow felt that entrepreneurship would give me the expression to be able to freely say who I was, what I wanted to do, and to build what I believed in. Specifically in investing and private banking, many of you will know the industry is distribution led. So there is an inherent conflict of interest in the way in which we manage investments, because you get compensated by the product manufacturer. I thought that was all wrong. So I came from a place of a great deal of idealism and felt that there needed to be an honest broker in the market, so to speak, and said, let me set this up, because all of us as individuals keep thinking somebody else is going to do it, someone else can do it, and then we'll kind of join the journey. But I've also realized that sometimes you have to be the pioneer, and I still keep remembering that, you know, Coca-Cola, when it was first started, only sold 6 bottles in the first year that it started as a company. So the motivation was really to create something which would be good for society and good for just the world, I guess, the way I look at it.
Yeah, very interesting. Actually, I have one more follow-on question which we'll come back to later, around how did you as a solo women entrepreneur, you know, attract family offices like Nara and Murthy's. But before I ask you that, Shivani, how has your journey been? Because you were one of the first female fund managers in India, and I remember you coming on our show and telling us how difficult was it for you to fundraise and actually tell people that, okay, what I'm building is really real, it's not a joke. So tell me about that experience of yours.
Yeah, Radhika, very happy to share the journey. I guess, you know, the small takeaway from my journey is that when you decide to be an entrepreneur, just do it. There's never a right time. So mine could not have been a worse time. I had a career in the US before that, where I was an investment banker. I started my career on Wall Street. I was in private equity. I had got my MBA from Wharton. I did my undergrad from a small liberal arts school in the US. Moved back to India. I was working at IDFC private equity. All of that. Then I took a break. I got married and I was pregnant. And I had no intention of starting a fund then, okay, but it was always in my mind. I said, this is something I'm very passionate about, and I'm also very passionate about the segment in which we invest, which is the mid-market. I found that in India, you had loads of venture capital money coming in, and then late growth. And as Neha was talking about, you know, structure and strategy, and, you know, so if you look at the Indian market, I felt that it was ripe for a platform to own that in-between space, where, you know, entrepreneurs come out of venture, but are not yet mature enough to be backed by the late growth companies. So this was my idea. Of course, the timing couldn't have been worse. I was 5 months pregnant. And somebody, I said, you know, Shivani, you keep talking about this. There is an investor who's looking out for a startup, you know, to back somebody with some money to start something. Why don't you go and have a conversation? So I really was not expecting anything to come out of it, and I was not mentally prepared. But I went and I laid out why I thought it made a lot of sense. I laid out, you know, if I started something where I saw this 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years down the road. And this gentleman turned around and said, I think this is fantastic and I would love to back you. And this is the amount of money that I'm going to put behind you. And, you know, I shared this with Radhika on the show that she did. Had I been a man, I would have just leapt across the table, you know, shook his hand and said, thank you very much, you know, but I'm a woman. What do? We always sort of, you know, want to put everything out there, and I did that. So I immediately said, wait a minute, but you know, I'm 5 months pregnant. And he turned around and said, congratulations. And he was not somebody who was, you know, very sort of smart or wanted to position himself for women's rights or anything. He was just a proper business guy, right? So he thought it made a lot of business sense. So I was taken aback by this. I came back, I met my husband that day and I said, I had a very strange experience. This happened, and you know, this person is saying that he wants to back me. And my husband said, congratulations. So I said, if these two men are going on saying congratulations, so then maybe it's possible. So I then, you know, while I was pregnant, I sort of got a few things together, started working on the PPM, applied for my license. My son was born February 1st, of that year, and I got my first, SEBI license on February 2nd. So always say I have twins, but
Wow, I think timing couldn't have been better.
so it was a strange way to start, but then I just stayed at it. So yeah.
Yeah, and of course, consistency pays off over years.
Yeah. So then I stayed at it, and it was. I don't want to, continue to this
yeah,
thing,
but
we'll
come
back to it
later.
Yeah,
but Soumya, like I told you, I'll come back to you again. Tell me, how did you attract those family offices to your newly found brand back in 2011?
So it was tough. I would say that when you, and because I was coming out of a corporate career, you sometimes think that your backers would be people who you knew in your earlier organization, only to find that you actually have new backers who may support you more when you're starting out something. But when we attracted family offices in two ways. One, and I don't know whether the question is as funder, as people who funded the company, or as clients.
Yeah, as clients.
As clients. I think we were actually demonstrating a very new business model. And that was something that families had not heard of before. So they were curious because they were suddenly seeing a woman, and they were also seeing someone who was looking at trying to help them manage their affairs better in terms of their investments. So I think when I look back on what really clicked is really the persistence. You've got to keep following up. Endlessly, and I think whether it's fundraising or whether it's just attracting clients, follow up is so important, and always thinking that there is a possibility that even if I've met somebody today, it doesn't mean that you have to transact with them today. It could be that you have to invest in those networks, which will then fructify maybe 6 months later, 1 year later, maybe 2 years later. For instance, I've just recently onboarded a client in Waterfield that I've been working on for 3.5 years. So my advice to everyone here is that you have to persist. You will get the no's, but you have to make sure that you stay engaged with whoever you're meeting. But more importantly, you have to add value to the person who you're soliciting business from. So what is the value add that you're bringing when you are pitching to somebody? I think it's crucial. I also think that you have to prepare a lot before. You only get sometimes one chance. So use that one chance really well and make sure that you haven't blown it. That's my advice.
How did you use your first chance for your first client? Tell me about that. And which one was that client that we could relate with?
I think the turning point was actually one of the Infosys co-founders. I think, and there I remember I would pitch, and then I didn't hear from him for a very long time, and I thought, oh God, I've lost it. I've not done this right. But then what I did is that I went to him saying what I thought was what I called level of preparedness of his family office. And the moment I put that down, I think he suddenly realized, oh my God, these are all the gaps that I have. So it was almost like you created a bit of FOMO, saying that you're missing out all this, where global family offices are actually at this level, and this is where you are. And the next day I got the call saying, I want to sign up. What are the next steps? I remember being in London at that time. I was in shock that I suddenly got a call saying that he was going to sign up as a client, still is a client.
Yeah, I think once you're prepared, the destiny or the universe rather gives it to you.
But I think more importantly, Radhika, you have to create the opportunity.
Yeah.
It's not waiting for somebody to,
knock at your door.
Knock at your door. You have to go out there and create those opportunities for success for yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. Neha, tell me about your journey of joining IFC. A lot of people aspire to be there. I'm sure a lot of women working in different funds here might have or might not have applied at IFC, but aspire to be there someday. And somehow people think that, okay, it's such a big organization, will I be able to get there? Is the process too tardy? So tell me about your story. How did you end up at IFC, and which funds in India have you backed?
For me as well, IFC, I used to be with a private equity firm before this, before IFC. I've been with IFC for about 5 years now. And I used to be with a firm for about 12 years before that. I did my CA, did my MBA, got placed at that firm. Life was great. And then this opportunity came about. Somebody I knew had joined IFC and he forwarded me this job profile saying, listen, I think this is very interesting for you. You've been on the other side of the table. This is a chance to jump as, you know, to become an LP. And maybe that's the next step. Why not look at it? Similar to what Shivani said, I remember I received the offer and I got to know that I was pregnant. So, so I called up my then super boss in the US and I said, listen, Maria, this is the news I've gotten. I've been with this firm for 12 years. It's okay if you want me to reject the offer because I know IFC has its standards, right? I mean, as a global organization, they can't reject the offer, they can't pull back the offer just for something like this. And I said, if you have a problem, if the team has a problem, I'm happy to sort of reject the offer myself so that you don't have to worry about it. I've been here, I know that I'll be fully supported in the firm, so is that all right? And they said, okay, how many months? And I was about 3 months pregnant, it just come to know. So they said, no, of course you can join. So I think for me, it was more about professional growth and personal growth. I had worked in a private equity firm. I had done a bunch of things, right from investing to I was the India CFO when I left. So I had done a lot of structuring. I had done a lot of fundraising across the board. Every 2-3 years, I used to get an opportunity to do something new. So it was a very interesting place to work for. But for me, I think moving to the other side of the table gave me a bird's eye view of the whole industry. And I had worked in a 12-member team which became a 20-member team when I left. I was actually the 8th employee in that firm. So I'd always worked with a very small team, never worked in a large organization. IFC in India is about 200 people. Globally we are 5,000 people. Multicultural, you know, across sort of nationalities. So I thought, okay, this is a once in a lifetime chance. Why not sort of look at it and see how it goes. Plus from a professional standpoint, one is the personal sort of journey, plus the professional standpoint was that, okay, I get to see what the industry is doing, not just in India, but across emerging markets. So I'm on the global IC where we invest across Africa, Latin America, Middle East, Eastern Europe. You get to see how the industry is changing, what is happening in each of these different geographies. And how is India, you know, or South Asia placed in that dynamics as well. So very interesting. Yeah, I think that's it.
And which funds are you backing?
Who have we backed? So I think IFC's journey, if I look back for the last 20-25 years in India, we started investing in funds in mid-2000s. At that time, the private equity industry was very new. There were very few fund managers who were actually in the market. So we did a lot of first-time fund managers at that point in time. Pretty much anybody who wanted money would knock on the doors of a DFI like IFC, like CDC, which is now the BII, DEG. And I think most of the DFIs played that role of seeding the industry, growing that industry by backing first-time managers. As time has evolved, so has our strategy. We are still very big lenders in the country. In fact, 80% of our business is actually lending. Equity is a smaller portion. But within equity, our group does about 2/3 of the equity. On the fund manager side, we've also matured. We are actually investors in Shivani's fund as well. We invested in the second fund a couple of years ago. That was probably one of the first deals we did when I joined IFC.
Tell me, how did you meet Shivani?
So I knew Shivani because I used to work in Shivani's brother's firm. So I knew her for the last 10 years. We'd never really interacted too much. So I knew of Shivani as Rahul Bhasin's sister. I knew that she was starting a fund. I knew of her journey, never really interacted too much. When I joined IFC, the first thing we did was we mapped about 200 fund managers. Because I didn't know the industry. So I said, okay, how do I invest in an industry which I don't know? So where do I start? So along with the analysts that I had, we said, okay, let's meet everybody that we can. Let's see what the industry looks like. We mapped about 200 managers for performance, strategy, segment. like Shivani said, the mid-market segment, the higher segment, the lower segment, across ticket sizes, across segments. And then we juxtaposed our own portfolio. That's where I said the portfolio fit was very important. And we saw, okay, in the last 10 years, who has made money, in what segment, where did we invest? And we found that we'd missed a few segments along the way, we'd missed a few strategies along the way. And we sort of then earmarked about 30-40 managers who we said, okay, they look very interesting, we want to track them. One of the managers that we found in that segment, in the sub $200 million fund segment, was Shivani's fund. And that's how then we sort of got back in touch. I think I joined IFC in 2018, you were fundraising in 2020.
Yeah.
We started interacting in 19, and then by the time we closed the deal, it was 2020. So it was 2 years sort of interactions over time that we sort of got to this point. So we've backed other managers. A couple of other women fund managers that we've backed are multiples, Renuka. We've backed the Bearing Asia Credit team, which is led by Kanchan Jain. We've backed funds like Lighthouse, we've backed funds like Fairing. So different segments, different strategies. Quadria in the healthcare segment.
How many of them are women fund managers that you've backed out of the total? Let's
so women
get there.
are about, since I joined, we've backed 3.
Out of
The 3 that I talked about. Total active fund managers that we have today would be about 15. Inactive would be much more. So our portfolio is about 50 funds across about 25, 26 fund managers. Out of those 26, some of those are legacy fund managers who are probably not doing this business anymore, or they are partners that we don't strategically identify with and we think we're not going to back them in the future. So out of the 13, 3 are women fund managers. It's not a bad percentage.
Yeah, that's not a bad
Yeah.
percentage at all. By the way.
Understood. But why do you think there are such few fund managers led by women, which were backed by IFC? Like, it's a question, right, that every one of us has, that why so few women?
See, honestly, if you look at it, 5 years ago, there were barely any fund managers, right? And for us, when we back a fund manager, we don't back them because they're a woman.
Yeah.
Correct.
Right? Like, I didn't back Shivani's fund
Correct.
thinking, okay, it's a women fund manager, or
Correct.
Kanchan's fund because it's a women fund manager. We backed because they were the best in the segment that they were. Shivani's Fund 1 returns were better than most funds that I had seen. Fund 2, the themes that she was doing, the thematic approach was something which is very different from what you see when you speak to a typical fund manager. If I talk about the credit fund that we backed, they've been investing in performing credit in their early avatar and then in the BPA context for the last 15 years or 13 years or 14 years or so, since 2011 or so. They've had 0 losses. I mean, I can't think of a single credit fund manager in India who can say we've had 0 loss.
Yeah.
Right? So, I think for us it's not about women versus men. It's about who's the best in the segment, and we back those. I don't think there are enough fund managers. Now for us as an institution as well, what has happened is when we look at our portfolio globally, geographies like Africa, like Latin America, Eastern Europe are where India was 25 years ago. And therefore that is where our focus goes in terms of the risk, right? Where we are doing more business with the intention of seeding the industry, creating the market, rather than earning returns. India as a market has matured, and therefore our focus in India has become a little bit more commercially focused, along with the developmental agenda that I talked about. And therefore we moved away from first time fund managers with no track record and all of that in a market like India. But the same team, if we see in Bangladesh or Nepal, we'll probably back them.
Yeah, but it's very good to know that 80% of your business is from India. Out of the
In South Asia, about 80% is 90% is India. Yeah, India is a
Wow.
pretty large market for us. Globally, we'll be about 25-30% because we have 4 big sort of emerging markets. So we're roughly about 25% of the industry.
Understood. But Shivani, coming to you,
Yeah.
you've backed a women-centric brand Enamour, and you have a very interesting story around that as to how did you find them out and how did you take an exit also with astronomical returns, So why don't you tell our audience today of how you found the founder?
Thanks, Radhika. So, as I said, one of our investment themes is women-oriented consumption. And we think we have a natural advantage in sort of understanding this space and in adding value to it. Okay? And we think it's a gigantic market. So we're not doing it just because we are women, so we want to find something neat to invest in, right? If you look at the total addressable market on the women, women-oriented consumption side, it's $1 trillion. So we're talking about a massive market opportunity, which may or may not be very well understood, because if you look at our industry structure, it is still primarily men that are in fund management. Okay. How do we go about our deal sourcing? We have a very bottoms-up approach. We have 2-3 things that we overlay upon each other to find the best opportunities to back companies that are beneficiaries of themes that we call transformational. And women-oriented consumption, we believe, is completely transformational. Why? Because if you look at the urban middle-class Indian woman today, she's very different than her mother, right? And her mother, if she had discretionary income, she was not spending it on herself, even if she had discretionary income. She was spending it on her husband, her children, her in-laws. Today, that young woman is saying, listen, if I'm not happy, I'm not healthy, and I'm not fit, then my family isn't either. Okay? So there's a complete shift which is happening. So this is the thematic approach that Neha was talking about, and the market is very large. How did we discover Enamour? We actually have a network now. Over the last decade, we've built a network of small, chartered accountants, one-man shops, people who are not obvious, not large investment banks, who we work with, and we build an entire ecosystem around. And we do a lot of thematic studies where we have companies on our list at all times that we are tracking. So Enamour was one of them. And we worked with a sort of individual who did not-for-profit work with the promoter on the weekends. So I mean, that's how we kind of identified the opportunity and we went after it. And what was interesting was, when we backed this company, the differentiation in this company was the brand. It was all about the brand, right? It was a lingerie company. It was all about the brand. But we came in, because of all our study, we came in and said, listen, we think you have a great management team, wonderful execution. We disagree with your brand. We disagree with your positioning. Because the positioning at the time was transform yourself. And we said that's very negative, and you don't have, that's not creating the right connect with the change that is happening on the ground. So we then hired a consultant who went to, urban cities, tier 2, tier 3 cities, took videos of women about how they feel about themselves, came back and said, in fact, you guys are right. And I think we need to do something to reposition the brand. So we used part of our money to come in, back a brand, but then reposition it completely from transform yourself to fabulous as I am. And then over our investment period, we helped then pivot the company to we are all fabulous. So move away from the cliche of using those size 0 models and all of that, and much more because women were buying lingerie for themselves. Okay, then of course we were very clear that this is a very distinct investment theme that we back. And I think the exit was a nice endorsement of our theme, because we were actually bought out by Advent, which manages several $1 billion, and they bought it to merge in with their men's innerwear company Dixie. So here was a fund which had the resources, which had a very good relationship with its promoter of an innerwear company, but yet thought women's innerwear was distinct and different. So I thought it was a nice endorsement of our strategy. So yeah, that was one of our exits from the first fund.
And would you want to tell us how much returns?
I can't talk about individual deals, but I can talk. So I was just telling Neha when we walked in that last week we achieved a good milestone, because we exited the last company in our first fund, which means that we are 100% exited in our first fund, and we have a realized portfolio DPI of 4.5x,
wow.
Which means that the investments that we have made on the portfolio side have yielded 4.5x for our investors. So we were very thrilled to give our investors those kind of returns. So the bar is high for the second fund. And Neha sitting here, so I'm feeling the pressure.
Yeah. Did you ever imagine you would be on the same panel?
We often are actually.
Okay, But Soumya, tell me that family offices are known to be patient capital providers. Is that a myth? Are they really patient, or how impatient are they? Tell me.
I think they're really patient. They are very, very patient when they come in as investors. I think what's important is to be able to find the right family office that can support you, because when you look at a family office, they basically created their wealth because they have been in a business, and they particularly have an affinity to businesses which are allied to theirs. So when they're looking to support a founder, you will invariably find that you want to go, they will automatically, if they are, let's say, a pharma company, may have a bit more affinity to healthcare in terms of just somebody who they want to support. So when you're looking at raising money from a family office, important to get that alignment quite right between who the family office is, the family principals, and the founder. So that would be.
Can I add one thing to what Soumya said? It's very true, about this affinity, even as LPs, whether you're fundraising for your company, whether you're fundraising for your fund, and Soumya mentioned earlier about, meeting, being persistent, understanding what the LP needs, how you are adding value to that sort of particular investor, whether it's a investor in your company, whether it's investor in your fund. I think it's a very, very valuable thing, because even when we meet fund managers, sometimes the fund manager walks in, gives us a pitch without having any idea of what we are looking for, right? Or what we've sort of committed to, and how this fits in with us. And when you sort of gently try to sort of nudge somebody in that direction, saying, but do you think this is okay, or what do you think of this? You can see that they're completely oblivious of what you're trying to sort of give them some sort of thoughts about, or some sort of signals about. So it's very, very important what Soumya just said, and it's relevant for any investor that you meet in any context, always. Yeah.
And also just more in terms of just this concept of patient capital. One of the reasons when I've raised capital from family offices, and I've done it thrice, I've done 3 rounds of funding at Waterfield, and it's really because they are truly patient in the sense that when you're building a new business model which you're not really sure about in terms of how it's going to play out or pan out, then you want somebody who's funding you who understands that this is not a linear journey. It can actually be very non-linear, and you'll keep adding on as you start building out the business. So for instance, when we first started the business, it was just advisory. Then we said, okay, let's then look at our private market investments, and we layered that. Then we looked at philanthropy, and we layered that. Then we looked at global investing, and we layered that. And at each stage, you want somebody who knows that you're in this kind of test and learn mode, and they don't have the exit pressure, which is there on, let's say, a fund investment, which makes it much better for an entrepreneur if you know that the cycle can be quite long. So that's one of the reasons I know I went to family offices, because I just felt that they would understand what I was trying to build a little better, because they themselves are actually a consumer of what I am trying to build. That kind of made it much simpler. I think the other reason I went to a family office was that, like any founder, you don't want very onerous kind of things to kind of hold you back.
Right.
Not that I think the fund managers do, they're very participative, but somewhere in a founder's mind, it's what are you giving up in order to get some capital, and is that trade-off worth it, is what you're always asking yourself. I know that when I raised capital for the first time from a family office, this was in March of 2014, I wasn't looking for money. I was thinking I'm going to be bootstrapped and I'm going to go build this business steadily. And I actually had the family office approach me and say that, look, we think you can actually scale the business because we can give you capital. And at that stage, my mind was very closed. I said, oh, I'm going to give up equity, and equity was very dear to me. But then after discussions with them, I realized that, look, if I did take external capital, I can actually scale. And if I can scale, then that has a virtuous cycle of, more revenue. More revenue means, you're just growing your business, you're scaling the business. But these are things that you kind of hesitate about when you are a founder, because you don't know what the implications are on the other side. For me, it was also about networks that you could get through this family office that invested, because they then can look at you and say, well, let me connect you to this person and let me connect you to that person. And I'm sure the same thing happens in funds as well, in terms of their portfolio companies, and they will connect the dots there. But in the family office segment, it's quite cliquey, I will say that. So if you get into one, you could get into many. So once you're there, then you try and just build those networks in those spaces. So getting into having a family office as an investor, it could be great. The one thing they may not be able to help you with is things like operational support. For instance, if you're building out for HR or finance or legal, those are things where I think a fund can do a lot of good work in terms of coming in. Also in terms of exits, because there's no pressure to exit as such. Whereas the funds will perhaps hold your feet to the fire and say, well, I need you to get this done. Whereas you may take it a little bit more easy when you've got a family office investor who's a little bit, well, they don't have an exit pressure. They could stay invested in you 10 years, 15 years, 20 years. I mean, when I look at, let's say, Kotak Mahindra, it was Kotak Mahindra. Anand Mahindra came in to support Uday Kotak early on and just stayed invested. So that's really the journey that you could have with a family office, which is great.
I mean, after this answer, people are actually pondering whether to go to funds or family offices. But tell me, is the route to get to family offices easy? I'm sure if they're patient, they will take a lot of time to make their mind up.
Actually, no, they're quite fast. In fact, decision making is perhaps much faster in a family office than it is in a fund structure, because I'm sure in a fund structure you've got perhaps a lot more formal way in which decision making happens, whereas with a family office it is still very formal, but ultimately the decision maker is the family principal in some sense. So the equation that the founder can build with the family office principal can actually mean that the decision can happen very quickly.
How quick can it be? Or has it been in your experience?
It could happen in I mean, I think maybe even to Shivani's point, where someone made the offer to back her fund. It's minutes. It's not necessary. It's one meeting, and they know whether they really want to support this founder or not. Of course, the rest of the due diligence and everything takes its own time, but fundamentally the decision is almost instantaneous, and that's where I think the genuineness of the founder has to come through in terms of what you're building and what you're trying to do. Don't try to say a lot of things which are untrue, because you will be found out. So make sure that you're very genuine, you're very specific. You're not I mean, I shouldn't be saying this, but there are times when you want to fake it till you make it, but at this time when you're raising money, don't ever do that.
But that's a very interesting point of conversation, where I'd like to ask you all, because stories tell the best, So Shivani, tell me also, which one was one of your most interesting meetings with the founders, where you decided within maybe just a few minutes or hours that, okay, I want to back this founder?
So, as Soumya said, we don't make decisions in minutes and seconds, okay?
Like the quickest,
so one of my investments in Fund 1 was in Sibyl. So we had been tracking the company for a while, and we just thought that the underlying tailwinds were gigantic. So one of our investment themes is financial services and technology, and we love backing companies that we think are in this sweet spot where they can really benefit from dramatic change at scale. And we saw that the way the credit market was moving was very dramatic. So if you look at the 10 years before COVID, there were, if I look at 2009, there were 1 million credit applications per month. And 2019, there were 1 million credit applications per day. So it's like 30x growth in 10 years. And this was a company where we had tracked, we had studied. So actually I'll take back something I said, that we don't make a decision in minutes, because it's easy to make a decision in minutes once you've spent months working on the company in the back end, right? You have already studied the company. In many of our companies that we invest in, we have studied the sector, we understand where it fits in our investment theme, we understand the market, we have done a deep dive on the promoter. If it's something that we're very excited about, we've done all of this before our first meeting. And then, of course, it looks very dramatic, and we have a wonderful first meeting, and we say we'd love to take this forward, but we've already done that work. Okay, so we're not actually making a decision in minutes.
Yeah.
We've done the work behind it. You know?
So Sybil was.
So Sybil, I would say, I mean, actually, a lot of our investee companies, Sybil, Enamour was something that we had done a lot of work in. You know. In our second fund also, we are making 2 investments right now, which we are quite excited about. I can't disclose them because we haven't closed them yet. But in both cases, we had been tracking the sectors for a long time, and we found that these are companies that we think are going to be key standout leaders there. You know, so like I said, yeah, we do the work before, and then we come in, and it seems like it's very fast, but it's not.
I think Soumya is gonna get a lot of applications now.
Yeah.
People love fastest approach to go.
Yeah.
Though I should actually qualify it that one of the things we do at Waterfield is actually to help family offices get much more structure in their investment making process.
Okay.
So that it's not just so immediate, that it is more thoughtful. So when you're now looking at an investment portfolio and you have a founder that's come to you, does it fit in with your sector? Does it fit in with the stage? Is it within your asset allocation? These are all the questions that we make sure family offices now have when they're actually making an investment decision. So that's something for everyone to keep in mind. If you're approaching family offices, much more disciplined now in terms of the way they look at their investments, almost bordering, and in some cases like the way funds would look at it themselves.
In fact, we are working with the family office right now and evaluating an opportunity with them, and I agree with you, Soumya. So I find that their approach, and they very much want to learn and understand our process, and they're very much in sync with that. This has been a slow process. We've been looking at a company for the last 2-3 months.
Thanks
we've not made a decision. And they are usually, guys, it's a very large South Bombay family office that I think has made decisions in minutes earlier, but we are spoiling them now. So,
making them more like the funds.
Correct.
But before I open the floor to the audience, I have a quick rapid fire with all 3 of y'all. You know, it's coffee with current season, so I thought why not here also. But Neha, quickly starting with you, tell me one of the most funniest stories of your stint at IFC.
I think funniest, insulting, I don't know what to call it. Went to meet a fund manager, very old, experienced guy, maybe close to 50s, 60s. Comes in, I was with my analyst, we were both sitting, and I'm sure we've all had experiences like these. I introduced myself, we start talking. The guy never looked at me once in the conversation. He was only looking at the analyst and talking because he was a guy.
Oh God.
So you know, we made a decision in a few minutes.
Yeah. That star is the fastest.
That was a quick one.
Soumya, what about you?
Very similar to Neha. I think where most times when I go into a meeting and I have a few, I mean, we have about 33% of our senior leadership are women, but a lot of the people on the investment side are still men. They just will not look at you. They will think that you're just someone who's there to almost take notes. So it's very awkward, but you know, I can't just recall anything which was truly funny, but I found it awkward.
Yeah, it is awkward. And I think we are making it funny because we don't care. We will still do our work. But Shivani, tell me.
Yeah, in fact, similar vein, I'll pick up the same thread since it's the, no, but I'll give a little bit of a funny thing. Was that when I first started fundraising, I was, you know, hell-bent on raising money from domestic institutions. And a lot of the meetings were, you know, very stodgy with the chairmen of these banks, and it was very formal. And I would walk into the meeting, and innumerable times, the person would look behind me waiting for the boss to come into the room. And so what I started doing is, I also started turning around and looking behind me. And so once or twice this became very awkward, because that I would look behind me and place my business card in front of him. and it's always a him, at least for most of the banks.
Most cases, yeah.
And then once or twice there would be an awkward silence, and then the meeting would start. In one case, the person started laughing, and I started laughing, and you know, the ice was broken. But yeah, so this is how it became a little funny. You're right, it's not funny, but we try to make it that
exactly.
way. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think
Yeah.
all these biases can be, you know, shared when stories
Yeah.
like these are spokenly,
Yeah.
openly spoken about. But yeah, the floor is open now to the audience. Anybody, any questions? We'll take a quick 5-minute Q&A.
I know it always takes a minute for people to get the question, so I thought I'll take that minute. You know, a great conversation, thank you. One of the things that I think, Neha, you said about we don't do this because they're women, we do this because they're best in their class. And you also talked about how very low loss rate. You talked about a fund with a 0 loss rate, and subsequently Soumya talked about putting more structure into family offices, and Shivani also talked about helping them become better. So I think you know, it's extraordinary how thoughtful women tend to be when they do almost anything, including business, including running a fund, including funding. I just want to understand, have a little bit of a conversation around what does that do to the ecosystem where you are actually competing with capital, which almost seems to be in the world of men, which is the competitive world. You know, like tables, like, you know, wo kehte na, roulette table. Oh, I like you. You went to the same school as me. You look good. Take this. Go try. Does that happen? Would that happen if there was more conviction? So like Soumya, in your case, for example, the family office, if it already has very strong conviction to say, I made my money on pharmaceutical, this young woman walks in, she has a pharmaceutical thing, let me just throw some money at it. Do we tend to get more cautious is my short question, and I'd like to just get your view on that. Do women tend to get more thoughtful, more cautious? It's our strength, but do we tend to overdo that?
As capital givers?
Yes, as capital givers.
I'll just say one thing. I think most people think that women are risk averse as investors, but I think we're just more risk aware. So there's a very subtle difference there. And by being more risk aware, and I'm saying it as an investor, when you're looking at it, you're trying to understand what the where does it fit in, what is the outcome that you're ultimately getting to, and they're a lot more thoughtful and deliberate on making sure that you've covered all your bases and you've understood all the different moving parts. That's not necessarily a bad thing. It's a great quality. It's a really good quality. So I would say that, you know, just we just continue to play to our strengths, and that's the way we should go. We shouldn't try to change who we are or what is innately how we behave or how we are. So and that is something that I think is the requirement. If you have more women investors, you'll automatically see more money which moves towards women-centric organizations. So the whole concept of gender lens investing, you'll automatically see that increase the moment you have more women investors.
Yeah, I'll add to what Soumya said. I think we also have an inherent advantage that often, I'm generalizing, often we approach a situation with a little bit less ego, and that makes us risk aware. It also makes us less prey to confirmation bias. In my industry, a lot of bad deals happen not because most people are very smart and they do their work, but oftentimes if someone looks at a company and says, you know, I think this is great, and they've already decided it, so they are unable to look at all the data and say, hey, this is not actually matching with what I came in with. Whereas I'm generalizing, but I think when women look at an issue, like Soumya said, we are more risk aware, and we are also approaching it saying this is my working hypothesis, but let me see the data and let me, you know, maybe I'm open to change. And I think that lends itself to great investing.
Can we have the next
Yeah.
question?
Hi, I'm Rajshri and I work in the warehousing investment sector. For all of you, I wanted to, build on the question that was raised by Radhika earlier, that there are fewer fund managers, fewer women fund managers. So, why do you think that is? Is it like, okay, now women have started considering this as a career and hence we are progressing? Is there still some resistance? And how can we bridge the gap faster?
See, the percentage of women, not just in investing, but even if you look at globally women CEOs, right?
Right.
I think the number
Right.
is some 4% or something.
Yeah.
So, I think women, at least in India, in the social context, what we had seen was, and I've seen with my friends as well, a lot of women drop out at the mid-level. Because that's the time when one gets married, has kids, has family pressure, societal pressure, and you say, okay, one of us has to take a back seat in our career because we want to focus on the family, and it typically in the Indian context is the woman. And that is why, and it's not as easy to come back to work 10 years later when your kids are grown up and you feel, okay, now you want to do something again. This was very true 25 years ago, 20 years ago. I think now it's changing. One, a lot of us don't drop out, right? I mean, Shivani started a fund when she was pregnant. I changed my job when I was pregnant. And I think that wasn't a deterrent because we had the family support,
Correct.
we had the whatever support we needed, we could get, we could find it. There are, of course, people who are not as lucky, who are not able to get that support. So I think that is changing, and we are seeing a lot more women are getting that support also from the employers. A lot of our fund managers now, one of our fund managers, and I won't name them, but they have two sort of co-heads of investing now who are women who've grown the ranks over the last 10 years. Majority of their team is now women at the junior level as well. And I was speaking to the fund manager, there are 3 male partners who started this fund. The guy was telling me, Neha, we have to now we're thinking of building a creche in our firm, because if I look at the average age of my women employees, including the 2 partners, they're all going the family way. I don't want them to drop off. I want to have a creche in my office so that, and it's fun, right? Why not? Where the kid can play, there's a nanny, there's whoever is helping them. It's all right. I don't think it's going to affect us. I think COVID again has played a little bit of that part, right? Where people are saying it's okay, we can commingle work and this kind of life. It's not always true, but there is this mindset change that we are seeing, and it will take time. Incrementally, it will take time to become a phenomena where we will see a drastic change in these numbers.
Yeah.
I'm just going to add one point that to all of what Neha said, very true. The one thing we have to keep in mind is that in the private equity and the venture world, it's a very nascent ecosystem in India. So if you looked at other industries like maybe financial services and banks and things like that, you always had women who were predominantly in those sectors. But the newer sectors that are now emerging, like private equity and venture, was not a career option for somebody like me 30 years ago, right? So where I went was a bank, or you went to a consulting firm. You didn't really have the choice of being an investor in a private equity or a ventures side. So my sense is that even as the ecosystem matures, you are already seeing a lot of women in the middle layers and funds. They're all within the next 5 to 10 years going to get to positions where they are partners in these companies. And of course, there's a lot of emphasis even through the ESG route. I mean, we are asset allocators, so we have a fund of funds. So we actually have a ESG checklist. We actually ask the question a lot around gender, around where they're investing through the partners in these GPs in the funds. So I think as those questions are asked of the asset owner to funds and otherwise, you will automatically see that play out over the next 5 or 10 years. I think this is the best possible time that you could actually start looking at careers in these spaces.
Yeah, and I'll add one more thing because I think Neha and Soumya have summed it up beautifully. But I'll just add one more nuance is this, in our business, there's still a little bit of stereotypes around fund management, maybe because it is a nascent industry, there are very few of us. So still there is that feeling that deal making, you know, oh, it's the man in the corner office and, you know, all of that stuff, right? And I think as you see more and more women investors, and I think Shinjini, you brought up a lovely question, because, you know, investing, a lot of our traits are actually setting us up to be wonderful investors. And I think as people see that more and more, you will have more women that want to get into this industry and will not fall prey to the stereotype that, oh, this is, you know, a very tough male oriented kind of a thing. Oh, I don't have the skill set. Oh God, it's so math oriented, I can't hack it, right? So I feel even for the youngsters and all of that, we should be out there busting stereotypes. And I think the more of us that are in the room and you know, on panels like this, hopefully that'll percolate.
You know, 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, when I started in 2006, I was probably the first woman employee in the firm.
Correct.
In the investing piece, the non sort of administrative staff. And I recall when we used to go for meetings, most of the entrepreneurs that were backed were also very old family patriarchs.
Men.
And yes, men. And it was very difficult to sort of build a relationship that I could never build a relationship with a person like that. Right? Going back to the networking question, that okay, when you're, it was easy for a man with grey hair to build that relationship versus a woman who's younger. Today, I think that is also changing because of the kind of companies, the kind of entrepreneurs we have. They're younger. They're not just male. Even if they're male, they're sort of more forward-looking than most of these age-old sort of entrepreneurs that we used to back earlier. So I think that again will play a shift where investors, as women, I wouldn't feel awkward today going and meeting 50 sort of entrepreneurs because the mix is very different. The fund managers that we meet today, it's not the average 55, 60-year-old who comes and pitches to us. Correct. It's generally younger people, women, men, much more accepting of the social reality that hey, you have to deal with women as well, and they're respectful.
We'll take last two questions as we run out of time. Paula, you're moderating the next session, so I'm going to reserve that for you.
Hi, I'm Astha. I'm in the investment team of the Fundamentum Partnership. Actually, first of all, thanks Radhika for organizing all of this. Neha, Shivani, Soumya, all of you are inspirations for, if not all of us, most of us. And your leaders, your founders, you've been doing this for a long time and you've been making it work in an environment which is intellectually, physically and emotionally grueling, to say the least. How have you made your life work in a way that you're able to sit in front of us and make your families, your partners, your companies, your employees, your everyone happy?
Everyone is never happy.
Everyone's unhappy. Why do you say they're happy?
So you have to stop trying to make everyone happy. You have to decide what makes me happy.
I asked like an existential life crisis.
I know.
I remember when I got pregnant, my husband, the first thing he said was, okay, we need to find a japa for you. Because you're going to make my life hell. So I think you just have to make sure that you know, you're finding the right mix, you're finding the right balance, what works for you. Thankfully, organizations like ours are also supportive with flexi work and all of that. I mean, today when I was coming for the event, I didn't go to office today. I said, okay, I'll work from home. I got my daughter for a play date nearby to one of my friends' home with his son, and I said, okay, I'll drop you here. I'll pick you up at 8:30 when I'm going back home. So you just have to make life work for you, right? And build the support system.
Yeah. Similar sort of thing as Neha said. We can't. I think don't try to make everyone happy also. I think first of all, don't do that. That's a losing battle, right? But try to get a support system around you, you know, spouses, japa maids, whatever it takes. Just have lots and lots of help, lots of support. Similar to Neha, I also worked from home today because I had lots of things closing and I'm flying out tomorrow night to the US. I had a lot of things to finish before that. And I'm delighted I did because my son is now a newly minted teenager and has decided that he must keep long hair. and I got a call from the principal, and he was sent home for a haircut and then sent back to school. So in the middle of all of that, that had to be coordinated. So yeah, don't try to keep everybody happy, and don't sweat the small stuff. I also didn't flip out over it. I was like, okay, fine, get your hair cut. In a way, I'm happy because at least now he's going to listen, because the principal has said his hair needs to be shorter. So anyway, that's it.
And you'll never find the right balance.
Yeah, exactly.
That's one more thing, right?
Correct.
I mean, there are days when I'm working till 4 a.m. every day.
Absolutely.
And then there are days when I say, okay, the next 2 days I'm going to be working 2 hours a day.
Correct.
So you will never find the right balance that, okay, every day you're working 10 hours a day or 12 hours a day. There'll be days where you'll do one thing more than the other, and it's absolutely fine. There are days when my house looks like a mess, and it's okay, it's all right. I'm not ashamed of it. It's fine. I'm working, I'm managing a toddler.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's too many things to manage. It's fine if my house, if somebody has a problem, please be my guest. I'll be out. I'm asking for help. It's all right.
Yeah.
Who's the next one? Yes, last one.
But thank you for that conversation. I know there are many examples, but I'm still keen to see or hear your side of the story, which is, have you experienced ageism in looking at founders, when you have looked at founders? As a founder, I experience it. I often get a pushback saying, well, I have gray hair, maybe not commensurate to my age, but I do have gray. So, but I do get a pushback saying entrepreneurs and founders ought to be younger. What is your experience? I mean, Soumya, I know you're disagreeing.
So I disagree because I think I started entrepreneurship at 40. I think someone like Falguni Nair started at 50.
Exactly, yeah.
So in that sense, I wouldn't.
I have these examples, but I still wanted to see if you...
My sense is that it's more about just the idea, what you're building, because to, I think what Neha alluded to earlier as well, it's not about the gender, it's really about the idea at that point, which is it something that is a good idea, is it a competent founder, have they got the right team, have they got the right idea, what are they looking at building? Those are the questions that an investor is looking at, and I wouldn't want to put too much of a lens on, is it a woman or a man who's sitting in front of us asking us for money or capital. So
I'll add to that because suddenly in 21 what happened was it was all about the youngsters coming out and fast and furious, building fast businesses, not worried about unit economics. And I found promoters walking into my office where, the youngest guy who's an analyst was looking like very seasoned and, in front of them because they were just so young, right? And at that time we backed this very interesting company which was run by a husband and wife duo in their early 50s. So I think it's about finding the right, it's a little bit of the flavor of the month. Neha very interestingly talked about in 2006 where it was the opposite, where you had to be sort of this, much older man to command respect. 21, you had to be, if you were 30, it was like, oh God, you're too old, right? So I think it's a little bit about where, I don't know when you went out or when you were looking, but I think things are changing back again where it's becoming more normalized, So I don't know whether you faced that in 21, 22, you might have.
And I think, see, this is more true in the tech world.
Correct.
Right, where people feel, okay, if you're a techie and you've worked as a tech, analyst or AI or whatever for the last 5 years, you've done something great in life and you have the license to do whatever you want to. And therefore, if you have a tech business, this bias may be a little bit more, which I believe you have. But I think there are a lot of, even when we talk to our fund managers, we're invested in a growth equity fund which backs consumer tech businesses, not at seed stage with Series A, Series B, B+. And they say that the best promoters we've backed in the last 15 years have been people who worked for 10 to 20 years on average, and then stepped out of the organization saying, okay, we see this is a problem that we're trying to solve, this is a gap in the market that we're trying to solve. And because they've worked for 10 to 20 years, they have that experience, they have the maturity, emotional as well as professional. And so we're seeing that change significantly for sure. A lot of our fund managers are seeing this.
Great point about the tech, I think.
All right, so we come to the end of the session. I know a lot of y'all are upset, maybe because y'all couldn't ask the questions, but hopefully our panelists will be here till the end and you'll will get to meet them. I deliberately didn't ask too many technical questions because y'all hear them all day long on CNBC, ET Now, speak about their businesses. This is the side of stories that you do not get to hear quite often. So that was it. But thanks a lot, Soumya, Shivani and Neha, for giving your time. I hope everybody enjoyed this session as well. And now I hand over to Paula, who will be conducting our second session.
Thank you, Radhika.